Guys, we're going to move on to one of my favorite segments, Bear or Bull. This is the team stock watch edition. But basically, is your team in a bear market? Are they trending down, or are they in a bull market? Are they trending up? And we're going to just be positive and start with our trending up teams. And Cam, you're up first. You picked Texas Tech. You like
I
them.
did. I got to tell you, I am 100% in the Texas Tech bandwagon going into next season. I'll list my reasons as to why. I'll try and keep it short. So the head coach, Joey McGuire, is 16-9 over the last two seasons. Big reasons for, really being able to trend up. There's three things I look for. Number one, you have seniority on a roster and being able to maintain it. They have 87 players returning next season, led by a quarterback who put up 3,300 yards and 27 touchdowns, and a linebacker with 118 tackles last season, and Jacob Rodriguez. They have the number 25 recruiting class in the country, and they are averaging number four over the last three seasons in the Big 12, which is pretty good. And then last but not least, it takes good transfer portal presence. They've been number three, or they are number three in the transfer portal right now. So they currently have seven four-star athletes, which includes three defensive linemen. Their defense is going to be nasty.
Mhm.
And then the closest Big 12 team to them is actually Colorado. I'm really excited to see how they work out, but I expect them in the playoff next season.
So I haven't watched a Texas Tech game since Michael Crabtree against
Can't say
Texas.
I have either.
Evan, Evan,
No.
you have anything to add on this team?
Yeah, no, Texas Tech is killing it right now. They're definitely on the uptrend, but I can't say I watched a single snap last season.
Okay, well, t leave it to Cam to pick a team like that. Uh, moving on, a game I know Cam and I watched because he was at my house for Thanksgiving for this. Evan, you're keen on Georgia Tech and Haynes King.
Yeah, love it. Brent Key, he's done an incredible job. That's their head coach since he took over halfway through the 2022 season. This was a team that won three games in 2021, and they were on pace to not win two games in 2022 when he took over. Next year, you've got quarterback Haynes King and their lead rusher Jamal Haynes, who combined for 34 total touchdowns last year. They're coming back. Then on the other side, their biggest room for improvement is on their defense, and they're going to get some help. They've got the number three safety coming in next year, Tay Harris, and they've also got a pretty good transfer class coming in as well. And let's be honest, it's the ACC. They started out with an upset last year, and then they didn't stop there. They got a few upsets last year against an amazing Miami team,
Mhm.
and a couple others along the way. I mean, really, their worst game last year was Louisville, who was ranked 19 at the time, and then Notre Dame, who was the runner-up in the national championship. Other than that, they didn't have any bad losses. So I'm really keen on Georgia Tech to come in next year and possibly be in that ACC championship game.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a conference that's wide open, it's that one and probably the Big 12. Cam, you got anything to add on E-Tech?
I mean, Georgia Tech isn't bad, but historically, when they've had a good season, they've taken a step back the following season. I know they're returning a good bit of talent. I'm excited to see what happens. I think it's an interesting take from Evan.
All right. All right, guys, we're going to move on to my team. I promise you, I am not trying to be a homer, but I'm really excited about what the Gators could do next season.
Joey,
Uh,
where'd you go to college?
USF. Hey, Florida rejected me, so shame on them. Thanks for bringing that up, though. Uh, After starting 4-5 last year, Florida rebounded to win their final four games, including wins over LSU and Ole Miss, effectively knocking both teams out of the playoff chase. This is a team that lost back-to-back weeks to Texas and Georgia by a combined score of 83 to 37, which is pretty terrible. And during that Texas game, it was announced that Napier was guaranteed another year, and they just got shellacked that game. Uh, DJ Lagway, a lot of promise. He needs more polish for sure. But he has a beautiful deep ball. The game seemed to slow down for him. I want to see him use his legs more next season. Just 101 yards on 50 carries. He's an athletic guy, so he can certainly do more there. Also on offense, Florida returns their All-American center Jake Slaughter and true freshman running back Jaden Baugh, who led the team in rushing yards and touchdowns last year. They do need to retool a bit on defense. They lost Jack Pyburn to LSU in a transfer portal, and one of their leading tacklers, Cam Jackson, was a senior. But guys, I want to temper my expectations. Florida's going to have one of the toughest schedules in the country again next year. Listen to this. Home games against Texas and Georgia, which is in Jacksonville, but it's their home game this year. Texas, Georgia, and Tennessee. Those are their home games. Their road games are LSU, Miami, Texas A&M, and Ole Miss. So I'm not optimistic. And while Bailey Napier finished the year strong, there's a strong chance they could start 3-3 or 2-4 next year. Their first, this is where I want to get you guys to chime in. Their first 6 games are Long Island University, USF at home, at LSU, at Miami, home against Texas, Texas A&M. I mean, do you guys see a situation where they're 4-2? I don't.
I mean, the only thing I have to say with Florida is you never know. Florida is just one of those teams that can look just the worst one week, and then the next week they upset a top 5 team. You really never know. Exactly. Yeah, you absolutely never know with Florida. And what I'm really curious about is they stepped up in a big way this past year, especially with a gauntlet of a schedule that they had.
Mhm. Yeah.
My only concern really is Napier is an amazing recruiter, but I still don't see him develop his players as much as a lot of the other coaches do. You look at Anthony Richardson, starter in the NFL, had a really mediocre career at Florida. So I'm surprised with them. I'm happy for them. I'm definitely up on them as well compared to where I thought they were going to be. But I'm really interested to see next year.
Listen, this team is not an SEC championship contender or a playoff contender. Let's be real. But I think an 8-win regular season or 9-win is a step in the right direction for this team, but I just don't know if they're going to get there.
So I agree with you. One point I do want to make, and it's really confusing to me, Evan will probably agree. The scheduling that the SEC is currently doing, where it's the inverse for 2 years in a row, is really weird. So, like, Alabama will play Georgia 2 years in a row this year, which is not something that has ever happened. Florida had a bear of a schedule, to put it PG, for 2024. And for it not to get any better in 2025 is pretty sacrilegious for the SEC to do to them. I agree with you, Joey. I think 8-4. And Billy had a fantastic year.
Yeah.
And the saddest part is 8-4, and they might still be a top 12 team, but they may not make the playoff. And that's a really sad realization to have. To have to play LSU, Ole Miss, Texas, and Georgia, even if you just lose those games, that means you can't have a fluke anywhere else. And those are all 4 of the top, 10 teams in the country, if not higher.
And USF isn't exactly a pushover. I mean, they played well against Alabama the last few years. I mean,
comparatively to the other schools I mentioned, they're easy, but to your point, they're not a rollover.
I say Long Island is the only guaranteed win I see.
I didn't know that
unless
was a
you're
school.
Florida State, Mike Norvell might find a way to lose that game.
Yeah, Florida State should be a guaranteed win. So we'll see. Guys, let's go to our teams that are in the bear market or trending down. And this is a really interesting team, Cam. Southern Cal. Did you guys know that there's general managers in college football now? Because USC just hired away Notre Dame's general manager the other day. I didn't know that was a thing. This Lincoln Riley experiment, dude, is maybe coming crashing very soon.
So I'm actually going to go off what I've written here. So USC is 25-14 over the last 3 years. It's really all I've got. Outside of those, has Lincoln Riley met anyone's expectations in being at USC? I mean, you have to think people are wanting USC to actually come in and, make a conference title. Then they move to the Big Ten. It becomes significantly harder. So you have to recruit better. You have to pull in transfer portal. You have to do better. Instead, you go and lose your best receiver, Evan, not to Tennessee, and Zachariah Branch. You lose a whole bunch of talent, and seemingly nothing comes in. Nothing works. Miller Moss is gone. Caleb Williams, there was supposed to be Miller Moss there. It just hasn't worked. I don't think from a defensive side it's getting any better. I don't think from an offensive side it's getting any better. And I think the expectations of a pretty needy USC program are about to come to a head. I think this is the end for Lincoln Riley at USC this year.
He has lost four more games in 3 seasons at USC than he did in 5 seasons at Oklahoma, Evan.
Yeah, it's Lincoln Riley. I really liked him at Oklahoma at the time. I thought it was a great hire for USC, and now you're kind of seeing how everything's just falling apart. I mean, it's a tale of 2 seasons. USC is one of those teams that every year they're going to be talked about on the national level as being a contender, but with the people at the helm right now, it's just not working out.
The other thing that just doesn't make sense to me, USC Southern California, you should have more money than anyone, and yet you find a way not to. How does that even work? You're in Southern California. How are you getting beaten out by, Austin, Texas, or Tuscaloosa, Alabama? Even Clemson, I would take over them.
I,
Don't
I
get
just
it.
don't I just don't know how you're gonna replicate those Pete Carroll years. I mean, I
No.
don't know that Lincoln Riley is all show and no substance. I mean, he has the look, but I don't think he can probably win 9 or 10 games for you many years, right? I just don't think he has what it takes to have an elite program.
Joey, the only thing I'm going to fight you on that, I think Lincoln Riley is a good coach. I think USC was a bad fit. He's
Okay.
good being a big fish in a small pond, but not the opposite of that. When he was
Yep.
at Oklahoma, what made him special is his ability to coach quarterbacks that were coming into a school and wanted to stick out. When he has this kind of problematic, aspirational goals from everyone around him, I don't think he's quite up to the task. I don't think he's a bad coach. I just think he's in over his head at a really big school.
Well, didn't he announce he was leaving Oklahoma like the season after it was announced Oklahoma was going to the SEC? It was really close to
Yes,
it.
it
But
was
anyways,
close. Yeah.
he
How
got
ironic that USC joined the
yeah,
Big Ten.
exactly. I mean, it's maybe an even more difficult. It's not a more difficult conference, but it's a close second.
Imagine him moving to a Baylor or something. That could be
Yeah,
really fun to watch.
the Big 12 is crazy, dude. Speaking of that, let's move on to Evan's team. Nightmare season for Oklahoma State. Started 3-0, lost their final 9 games. All 9 losses were conference games, Evan.
Yeah, you go from a 10-4 season in 2023 to 3-9 this season at just last in your conference. It's a bad look for Mike Gundy over there. He's been there for so long. In a majority of the seasons that he's there, he's ranked in the top 15. The majority of the seasons he's there, he has 10-win seasons. And it's just been going downhill for the last couple of years with a lot of ups and downs. And here's the thing. Ollie Gordon, you look at him 2 years ago, best running back in the league, 1,700 yards, tons of touchdowns. He decides to come back, was convinced to come back instead of declaring for the draft. Bad play calling is the reason that Oklahoma State has been so bad. This past year, he dropped almost 1,000 yards and about, I think, half the amount of touchdowns. He didn't he was set up for failure with the system that they had. Now going into next year, yeah, they're getting a new OC in Doug Meacham. Unfortunately, Doug, he's coming off of a few years at TCU as their wide receiver coach. He's gone back and forth a couple times as an OC, and he's had some success at Kansas and when he was at TCU for 1 year as their OC, he had a pretty good record. But he's come again. There's a reason he didn't stick it out at TCU, right? I'm not sure if he's the guy that's going to be the one to call the big plays going forward. I don't. I think this is going to be a pretty rough couple years for Oklahoma State, and I don't know how much longer Mike Gundy is gonna stick it out there. He's been there since 2005, and it might be time to make a change.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. The mullet's not helping out, is it, Cam?
No, it's not great.
The one question I have for you, Evan, and it's kind of the Boise State complex right now. Boise State went what, 14-0, or sorry, 13-1 last season before they lost. No, sorry, they lost to Oregon. They were
You know,
12-2. Um, the question that I have, Boise State next season. I don't know that they will make the playoff because they would have to go undefeated in conference again and have to have an excellent year. On the other side of that, you have a team like an Oklahoma State where we know what Mike Gundy is capable of because usually he's a 7-5, 8-4, maybe a 9-3 on a fringe year coach. I don't think he's going to be worse. So the idea of trending down into next season, I don't think he will be worse than 3-9.
I don't know. I really don't. Looking at their schedule next year, they don't exactly have the easiest schedule. They're not in the easiest conference anymore. That conference is on the upswing, and this is a team that has not dealt well with all the realignments. And they're not getting a bunch of big hitters coming in next year. They're kind of middle of the pack as far as recruiting goes. And you say that only fringe years he's had big seasons. Majority of the time, he's up in the conversation for the conference championship.
Yeah,
Majority
but
of the
eight
time,
and
they're
eight and
getting.
four is a conference championship for them.
I'm I'm just saying that this is a team that over time, and I mean, if we're looking at it just from a perspective of averages, they are trending down probably most in the country than anybody else.
One statement I'll make is by competitive depth, the Big 12 is the best conference in the United States. Period.
Well, that's not a great segue into my other trending down team because it's a Big 12 team. Cincinnati, thanks, Cam, again. Cincinnati Big Bearcats are trending down. This team is just 3 seasons removed from a college football playoff appearance. In those 3 seasons, they've gone 17-20. The last 2 seasons under Scott Satterfield, who came over from Louisville, 8-16. Their transition to the Big 12 has not been ideal. 4-14 in conference. That's the worst conference record compared to the 3 other teams that joined them in 2013. That would be UCF, BYU, and Houston. Now, UCF, they've all haven't been great, but Cincinnati had the worst record out of all of those. This past season, Cincinnati started 5-2, lost their final 5 games. Looking ahead, one positive, they have the 22nd best transfer portal class in the last cycle, according to On3. But guys, I mean, I don't really take a lot of stock in that because you just don't know who these transfers are or what they're going to do after these guys, are third stringers on their old team, and that's why they're transferring. As far as the roster is concerned, leading rusher Corey Kinner had 1,100 yards last season. He's going pro. Brendan Sorby, he's returning. He had a solid year last year. He originally was at Indiana and then transferred to Cincy. 2,800 yards, 18 touchdowns, 7 picks last season. Also had 447 yards on the ground and 9 touchdowns. And guys, pretty much all I got to say about Cincy right here is they haven't had 3 straight losing seasons since 1992. They could do that this year if they have a losing record. And you can bet your bottom dollar Satterfield is going to be looking for new work if that happens. Would you agree?
Yeah, since he's always one of those teams that they're just right on the cusp of they
Mhm.
could be a really cool team to watch.
Yeah.
In some years, they are. And then you have years like this one where it shows right at the beginning of the season and then it's downhill.
Yeah. Anything, Cam?
Honestly, no. I think I would put my stock in Oklahoma State before I put my stock in Cincy.
Comment, subscribe, follow us on everything you see down there below. We are getting more active on all the social media sites and trying to pump out a lot more content. We appreciate you watching and come back next week.